I would wipe that smile off your face. I'm Sergeant McDaniels with the Orange County Sheriff's Office. You're being stopped for dangerous excessive speeding.
I understand my tire at the back is like literally on 29.
So you're driving at 100. Hold on. You're driving at 104 miles an hour in a 65 mile an hour zone with subpar equipment, flashing people to get out of your lights, out of your way, following too close, using every lane to pass everybody, cutting me off, passing a car on the inside shoulder with their hazard lights on. You're going to jail for dangerous excessive speeding.
The sport is always getting some spotlight sometimes in ways that you don't want it to happen. And to be honest with you, I contemplated about whether I should speak on this issue, but I'm going to do it because I labeled the video as, Sha'Carri and Coleman arrested, which is interesting because I've advocated all the time for a lot of spotlight on the sport, for track and field deserving to be in mainstream in many ways. And yet we get into the sport or into the news media in different ways and in ways that may not necessarily shed the greatest of light on the sport, right? And I don't seemingly want to be one harping on poor behavior in many ways, but I'll say something about it. I'll say something particularly about Coleman in general, and what it means to think about sport in ways that may not necessarily go against the water code for the possession of substances that are not performance related, but more recreational incline, and the idea that once you out of competition, there's a level of acceptance now, but it doesn't necessarily mean when we think about it from the pure nature of virtue ethics and thinking about what sport should mean and upholding a code of responsibility, that those are things that one would want to have at that point in time. So let's first start up with the realness and what we know so far. Clearly, we saw probably the most famous athlete, especially in the United States, Sha'Carri Richardson, got pulled over for an excessive amount of speed in Florida. A bit fast, what was it? 104 miles per hour was what the police said. Charged for dangerous driving, a bit of tailgating, maybe passing other vehicles, and it's not necessarily what you want to see. So it's a big ticket. They're going that fast over the speed limit, and it necessitates, there's new laws out there suggesting that if you do that, then you could be taken in for that. Now, that happens, there's videos of it, her asking not to be arrested. I don't know what to make of it. I think driving that fast seems a bit out there. You probably shouldn't be doing that, but I'm not here to cast judgment on that. So in any kind of realistic way, the only thing I would say is that this is just like, again, we've seen the incident that happened close to the World Championships, the trials, last year.
Okay, absolutely. You can ask him whatever you need to ask him. But yeah, you're a coward.
Is it Sha'Carri?
Sha'Carri. Thank you so much, Sha'Carri Richardson. Hey, y'all, please just listen to me as a person. It's Sha'Carri.
You have to go ahead and. Yep. Thank you.
This is crazy.
Then you end up in a situation again where you are having an interaction with law enforcement. That certainly isn't what you would necessarily want to have happen to one of the biggest names in the sport, and that certainly probably doesn't go down well with the companies that endorse her. I see Sherwood in the chat. He says he'll cast judgment. It's dangerous. Yeah, I think it's very dangerous. In that context, I agree with you. I don't want to overblow the situation of the speeding. It is certainly not something you should do, like going that fast, if assuming that the radars collaborated properly, and I don't have any expectations that that's not the case. To go that fast for anybody at any time is obviously out there. It's not a racetrack. It's speed limits aren't that fast in the United States. 70 miles per hour, you probably get away with an 85. Anything above that, you're putting yourself into some interesting ways for just ticketing in general. And then beyond that, it's really going into the reckless kind of parts of driving. So that is problematic there. Now, yeah, she goes through that. It is probably something that most people would get away with, and because of her status, it's gonna clearly garner people getting the body cam footage, the everything that's been released, the mugshot profiles. You get it. That comes with the territory when you have a level of fame. The part that's really intriguing to me, and the part that I worry a little bit about, is the idea that now Kristen Coleman arrives on the scene according to the police report. He comes up in another vehicle, is in a Jeep. He clearly is probably concerned about her being pulled over. He proceeds to try to intervene in some way, perhaps just ask questions. Anytime you start to do that, you're going to get police officers nervous, and that's going to be a problematic situation in general. So he's now gets arrested as well because apparently he dropped an object in the grass. So he's arrested for intervening in some ways, refusing to comply, resisting arrest is, I guess, is the official type of terminology there. He wasn't violent in any kind of way, but then he's been charged for having some drug paraphernalia. And so I guess they searched the vehicle at some point and they find something that suggests that he could, there's either suspected for cannabis or some kind of green leafy material is present in the car with some smoking device. Now, this is the kind of interesting thing where a lot of people have a lot of concern about. And look, if it's marijuana, if it's one of those kind of drugs, if it's a recreational drug, it doesn't meet the standard for performance enhancing. And we all know that. I don't have much to say about that. I'm not casting aspersions on, whether he's taking it or whether it was in his system, because we don't know if he was taking it, right? Like we just don't know. But the question is, why is that in your vehicle is always going to come up in some capacity here. Now, even though WADA has this interesting code about when you can take you can take these I'm trying to use words that doesn't flag the algorithm, but I guess it doesn't matter. So when you can take there's some substances you could probably do outside of competition that no one worries about in terms of your performance. And the lists, you could go on the WADA code and see the list, right? In competition rule is where that kind of becomes problematic. So if you take this and it's above a certain level in competition, it's going to count towards a positive test, and you can be suspended. You could face a bunch of different charges for that kind of stuff. My issue with all of this is that, and I've always said this in sport, and perhaps because I just think that there's the legality of things and there's the ethical kind of demands for top class athletes. And there's a spirit of sport. Sport is not just only competition or arrangement. There's a level of spirit involved in terms of our normative arrangement that comes over time, right? The idea of ethics, fair play, the kind of honesty, a level of character, and so on. And definitely you have to respect the rules and whatever is there. And so ultimately choosing to be around or taking, so I don't know if he's taking, so I want to make that abundantly clear, but be in the vicinity of things that we don't believe should be connected to the sport, or at least right now, the prevailing wisdom is that it should not be connected to the sport, lends itself to kind of questionable behavior. It lends itself to us starting to think about, like, why would you want to be in that kind of situation? Is it asks more questions than we have answers for, right? Like, you just don't want to be in that kind of situation. And so I am left to think that it's not a good situation, right? And I don't like it. I definitely don't like it. I have to speak on it. I don't know what else to say. I think that's even worse to me than the speeding part of the situation. It makes me question a lot of things I don't have. Yeah, it puts the sport in an interesting way, and we're talking about very high profile athlete here. And then, not to mention, obviously, you end up in a situation where three of the biggest US stars are in and around the same situation, right? Terry is there at the end. She obviously doesn't get she gets cited for I think she got cited for stopping at a limited access way, so that means it's more of a traffic violation there. But apparently, obviously, all of them probably came on the scene in support of Richards and of Sha'Carri, and so it's fine, right? Like, I think that may happen there, but all of them end up in the news, and it's not a good look for track and field, especially when what happened, say, last week in in New Balance, and what's going to happen in Melrose tomorrow should be all the talking points that we want to make. It should be about what's happening on the collegiate scene and the performances and why that's important. And then everywhere you look is, people who never talk about track and field are talking about this event. And that to me is never what you want to see in the sport. You don't want to be in that kind of spotlight for the wrong reasons, and this certainly isn't a good reason to be in the spotlight, driving recklessly. And certainly Coleman there, getting arrested too for suspected drug paraphernalia. That's not a good look. So I wish them the very best. It's not a particularly ultimately, these things probably could be worked out with some good lawyers. I don't suspect anything will go much beyond that case, but you just never know, right? And you don't want that to happen. And this obviously are things that could potentially, you could lose all your sponsorship for this as well. And so that's not what you want, because sponsors want you in the limelight, but they want you in the limelight for performances and for captivating new audiences to the sport and ultimately to their own products. So if you can't do that, then you create a nightmare.